The freight industry says there's been a significant improvement in the volumes that the ports are handling, and this is part of the overall improved operational capacity from Transnet that the industry is seeing as part of the SOE's turnaround plan. Let's speak now to Devlyn Naidoo, logistics and supply chain expert, and they're also a member of the EXCO at SA Association of Freight Forwarders. That's not a name one can pronounce quickly. Very good evening, Devlyn. Welcome to Power Business. What are some of the key changes that had to take place in order to see the substantial improvement in port capacity?
Thank you very much for having me, and I think you did a very good job at enunciating the Southern African Association of Freight Forwarders. Primarily as a key focus, it has to be around, as we have seen demonstrated by Transnet, exemplary restructure and reform in terms of execution around processes, around the management of systems, and of course the execution and maintenance of equipment, which we have seen have again been excellently achieved by Transnet with a stellar record performance of 97,000 TEUs, a clear sign of momentum, and of course 13% above Transnet's own target. So definitely around those areas, and Transnet have delivered yet again an excellent performance, as we have seen.
Let's just, for the listeners, what TEUs is. I found it an interesting metric.
Absolutely. So TEUs refer to the 20-foot equivalent units. So in containerization, you have a 6-meter box, which is 1 TEU, and a 12-meter box would be, by translation, then 2 20-foot equivalent units.
And Transnet handling over 97,000, as you said, 13% above target. And if we just look at the stronger port operations, did they have any impact in achieving May's 21.7 billion rand trade surplus?
Most certainly. So the improved port operations were indeed a critical enabler of the 21.7 billion rand trade surplus in May. As a result, efficient ports reduced the time and cost of moving goods, and thereby improved the exporters' ability to meet demand and boost competitiveness. Interesting to note, earlier this year, we estimated that South Africa was losing about approximately R1 billion per day in economic value from severe port inefficiencies. And of course, whilst not all the losses have been eliminated, these recent improvements by Transnet have been meaningfully reduced and reduced specifically the drag on the economy. So better performance of the port is essential for trade-driven growth, and of course supports a balance of payment stability, and definitely contributed to that 21.7 billion trade surplus in May.
And speaking of the trade surplus, what are some of the broader economic implications for this?
So over and above the plus in the balance of payments, it also results in the creation of jobs. When you have an efficient logistics network, there's a direct impact on the creation of a sustainable economy, and by extension then creating much needed jobs in South Africa. So there's an intimate link and a direct link between an efficient logistics network and of course economic performance.
And this efficient logistics network that South Africa is aiming towards, how important was the collaboration between government, Transnet, and the private sector, of which the SA Freight Forwarders Association is part of?
Collaboration is key. I believe that the realizations of the efficiency gains that we are experiencing is directly attributed to a collaborative, coherent approach between government, between Transnet and the private sector. The structured joint approach through the National Logistics Crisis Committee has resulted in shared visibility, faster decision-making, and clearer accountability, eliminating unnecessary red tape and solving for the pinpoint or very specific problems that have plagued our port. So to see this again once more, credit must go to Transnet, and government has played a convening and enabling role. And this model, of course, of collaborative governance is not only helping the ports recover, but also demonstrates a very viable path for broader infrastructure reform in our country, advocating and lobbying for sustainability, and institutionalizing this partnership will be critical and essential for long-term resilience and competitiveness. So we have to hold hands. We have to walk this journey together, Transnet, government, and the private sector, a recipe for success.
You speak of other infrastructure. Let's look then at other parts of Transnet operations, rail. What progress has been made in improving the network there?
So significant progress has been made. One would recall the National Freight Logistics Roadmap and, of course, the network statement put out a few months back as the enabling structure for improved rail network and export optimism. One would agree, and I'm sure the listeners would resonate, that the roads are overburdened, and a viable alternative is, of course, rail that supports the intermodalism of road, but improved reliability on our rail corridors will help support the export flows, especially for bulk commodities, which contributed significantly in terms of the 21.7 billion figure on your mineral exports. So whilst the rail network is far from fully recovered, there are indeed, through those enabling structures, targeted interventions and repairs on key lines that have enabled exporters to move product from pit to port more consistently. And of course, we're seeing the upswing in volumes. So this, of course, is fair optimism that continued investment and reform, rail can once again play its intended role in terms of lowering the logistics costs and, of course, supporting South Africa's trade competitiveness and putting us on the world stage.
That's the goal. You talked briefly about some of the challenges affecting rail, but what are some of the broader challenges that still remain within rail, within the ports?
Sure. So, despite the progress, as you correctly mentioned, rail remains a major bottleneck. Infrastructure damage, theft, and underinvestment over many years have significantly reduced capacity on crucial routes. So there's an urgent need for sustained investment to rehabilitate the lines, to secure the lines, signaling equipment, modernize the equipment, and of course improve security. So rail reform overall, including enabling private operators where feasible, will be essential to unlock growth and of course support the gains that we're seeing at the port. So without a reliable rail system, port improvements alone can't deliver the full extent of economic benefits.
And there's big plans to change the way that transport and the rail system works at the moment. Where is that investment going to come from? From the private sector, Transnet's CapEx?
Sure. So I think critical to that is, of course, rebuilding confidence that is dependent on sustained demonstrable improvements. And global shippers, investors, and trade partners will watch this reliability closely. So yes, indeed, foreign direct investment, local direct investment, and it has to be palatable for investors to participate. So in terms of restoring confidence through consistent performance and predictable policy, long-term investment will be enabled through these provisions. For us as a country, it's an opportunity to reposition ourselves as a dependable gateway for trade, not just into the African continent, but also as a conduit for the African continent to the rest of the world, and from the rest of the world to the African continent via South Africa. So again, requires us to maintain the momentum and focus on a diverse investment framework that has to be palatable for investors to participate in terms of rebuilding this global confidence.
What are the kinds of metrics or measurements that investors would be watching or the public should be watching in order to say this is really a strong logistics network now?
So definitely the number of TEUs handled in terms of the containerized sector, and then in terms of the simple economy, if you will, your mineral exports, also looking at throughput via the ports, which would be a key indicator in respect of port performance. I think also looking at a cost analysis in terms of efficiency gains and ultimately port productivity. So the port productivity index enabled through a logistics monitoring system, a weekly analysis will give investors the relevant insights to forge ahead with investment in our ports. And of course, I think definitely a sign of optimism as we can see the upswing with Transnet delivering and exceeding, in fact, its target by 13%.
All right, thanks very much. That's Devlyn Naidoo, logistics and supply chain expert, also an EXCO member at the SA Association of Freight Forwarders, taking us through glimmers of hope at South Africa's ports as Transnet's turnaround starts to really take shape.